Unstable SMP, the Minecraft server that saved Minecraft, almost didn't exist. But that's just one out of hundreds of secrets buried throughout its history. From players getting revived to secret identity, he is literally everything Unstable SMP tried to hide, starting with the true identity of eggchan. Eggchan is known for being Wembu's little sidekick, but what if I told you that eggchan has been hiding a secret that includes one of the server's most elite players, and he's been hiding his true power this entire time? This is what eggchan is really hiding. Let me start with the strongest evidence first, because this completely changes everything you thought you knew about eggchan. Eggchan killed a diamond tier mafia player and took their items. The proof is undeniable. He was wearing the player's diamond trimmed armor afterward, which is the signature armor of diamond tier mafia members. Now here's why that's absolutely insane and why nobody talks about it. Diamond tier players in the mafia were the elites of the elite. There were only 5 to 10 diamond players on the entire server at any given time. To become diamond tier, you had to defeat another diamond tier player in actual combat, which means every single diamond player had proven themselves as one of the strongest fighters on the server. And eggchan killed one of them. Keep that fact in mind because it reveals something terrifying about who eggchan really is. But it gets even worse. Every diamond tier player except FlameFrags has a mace, which means eggchan didn't just kill an elite player, he killed the mace holder. Maces are the rarest and most powerful weapons on Unstable SMP. There are only a handful left on the entire server, and eggchan took one from a diamond tier mafia member by killing them. Think about what that means for a second. This is the same eggchan who everyone treats like a joke, who gets captured by pirates, who acts unserious and unskilled constantly, but he somehow managed to kill one of the most dangerous players on the server and take their mace. How does that make any sense unless eggchan is hiding his true combat ability? Here's where things start to get disturbing. Eggchan is usually depicted as the brains between himself and Wemmbu. He's intelligent and generally distrusting. He picks up on other players' odd or sneaky behavior very quickly, but he acts completely unserious and unskilled in public, playing the role of the silly sidekick who needs protection. That's a classic strategy. You make your enemies underestimate you by pretending to be weaker than you actually are. And if eggchan can kill a diamond tier player, that means he's been pretending this entire time. Remember this pattern of eggchan hiding his intelligence and skill because it connects to everything else he's hiding. Now let's talk about eggchan's personality transformation, because this is where the theory gets genuinely disturbing. When eggchan first appeared on the server, he hated violence and made a point to try peace first in every situation. He was the voice of reason, the one who would talk things out, the one who preferred diplomacy over combat. But something changed. Now eggchan tends towards violence, now believing that sometimes death is the only answer. People don't just change their fundamental values like that unless something traumatic happens to them. Keep this personality shift in mind because we need to figure out what caused it. The answer might be Proton prison. Eggchan was trapped in solitary confinement in Proton, which is a prison designed by Canadian to be psychologically torturous. Solitary confinement breaks people mentally. It isolates them completely. It makes them question reality. It changes who they are at a fundamental level. When eggchan went into Proton, he hated violence and tried peace first. When eggchan came out of Proton, he believed sometimes death is the only answer. What happened to him in that solitary confinement cell that transformed him from a peaceful player into someone who embraces violence as a solution? And here's the question that should terrify you. Did eggchan kill that diamond tier player before or after his time in solitary confinement? But before we continue, I want to ask you to subscribe. These theory videos take hours to piece together, from researching to editing, and subscribing would generally help a ton. Also, let me know in the comments what you think eggchan is really hiding. Let's talk about eggchan's eye, because this is where things get even more suspicious. Eggchan claims his eye sees all. He uses it as intimidation. He acts like it gives him some kind of supernatural awareness of what's happening around him. But here's the reality. Eggchan has a lower rendered distance than most players on the server. His eye doesn't see all, it sees less than everyone else. Which begs the question, what does his signature line actually refer to? Here's what makes this even more interesting. Eggchan is generally distrusting and picks up on other players' odd or sneaky behavior very quickly. That's his real power. He's not seeing things physically, he's reading people psychologically. He can tell when someone's lying, when someone's planning something, when someone's behavior doesn't match their words. That's an intelligence skill, not a vision skill, which goes to show how smart eggchan secretly is. Let's look at eggchan's infiltration skills, because this proves he's far more capable than he pretends to be. Eggchan successfully disguised himself as a law member and nobody detected him. He infiltrated their ranks perfectly. He also joined the mafia and broke their invisibility rules by exposing himself, which should have gotten him killed immediately, but somehow he survived that too? These aren't the actions of an unskilled player who needs protection. These are the actions of someone who knows exactly how to blend in, how to deceive people, how to infiltrate organizations without getting caught. Remember how I said eggchan picks up on other players' sneaky behavior very quickly? That's because he's an expert at sneaky behavior himself. It takes one to know one. Now here's where we need to address something that most people overlook about eggchan's position on the server. Eggchan always allies himself with Wemmbu and is one of the few people Wemmbu actually trusts completely. That means Eggchan has access to all of Wembu's plans, all of his bases, all of his gear, all of his secrets. Wemmbu is one of the 4 main protagonists, one of the most powerful players on the server, and Eggchan is positioned right next to him at all times. If you wanted to spy on Wemmbu or manipulate him or control his actions, the best possible position would be exactly where Eggchan is right now. Keep this perfect spy position in mind because it raises a disturbing question about Eggchan's true loyalty. Let's talk about the times Eggchan gets captured because the pattern is suspicious. Eggchan is more than willing to risk himself to save others that he trusts. He constantly puts himself in danger for Wemmbu. He gets trapped in the end dimension, he gets captured by parents, he ends up in solitary confinement in Proton. Every single time Wemmbu has to rescue him or help him escape. But here's the question, what if Eggchan gets captured on purpose to manipulate Wemmbu? What if these aren't failures but calculated moves to keep Wemmbu emotionally invested and protective? Remember that when Eggchan killed a diamond tier player, he clearly can handle himself in combat when he wants to. So why does he keep ending up in situations where Wemmbu has to save him unless those situations serve a purpose? Here's another piece of evidence that suggests Eggchan is playing a deeper game. Eggchan attempted to make himself leader of the remnants of the pirates after they were defeated, not content being second to Wemmbu anymore, trying to establish his own power base, positioning himself for leadership. Eggchan saw the pirates were leaderless and immediately tried to take control, showing ambition and strategic thinking that contradicts his public persona completely. Now let's piece together the timeline and see what story emerges. Eggchan joins the server and befriends Wemmbu, positioning himself as the trusted ally who has access to everything. Eggchan joins the mafia and somehow survives, breaking their rules. Eggchan kills a diamond tier mafia player and takes their items, including possibly their mace. Eggchan gets trapped in solitary confinement in Proton where something traumatic happens. Eggchan emerges from Proton with a completely different personality, now believing that sometimes death is the only answer. Eggchan continues to act silly and unskilled publicly, while demonstrating advanced infiltration skills, combat ability, and strategic intelligence privately. Eggchan attempts to become leader of the pirates, showing his true ambitions. Here's the theory that I have. Eggchan is not weak, nor silly, nor unskilled. He's one of the most dangerous players on the server who's been deliberately hiding his true power by playing the role of Wembu's sidekick. The diamond tier player he killed wasn't lucky, it was calculated. The personality shift from peaceful to violent wasn't random, something in Proton broke him and made him realize that violence is necessary for survival. The constant captures aren't failures, they're manipulations to keep Wembu emotionally invested in protecting him. But here's where this theory gets truly disturbing. What if Eggchan killed that diamond tier player because they discovered what he was really hiding? What if that player figured out Eggchan's true identity or his real mission or something about him that needed to stay secret? Killing a diamond tier player isn't something you do casually. It's something you do when you have no other choice, when that player knows too much, when eliminating them is the only way to protect yourself. And if Eggchan was willing to kill a diamond tier player to protect his secrets, what else is he willing to do? The scariest part about this theory is that if it's true, Eggchan has successfully fooled the entire server for multiple seasons. Nobody suspects him, nobody questions him, nobody sees him as a threat. He's positioned himself perfectly to either protect Wemmbu from something terrible or betray Wemmbu when the moment is right, and we won't know which one until it's too late. The diamond tier player he killed might have been the only person who figured out what Eggchan was really hiding, and Eggchan made sure they could never tell anyone. Now the question is, what happens when someone else figures it out? Or hear me out, Eggchan is generally just a silly, squishy little egg and I'm just overthinking it. Chances are that's probably the case. This is Tealball the Bird, and I believe that he is about to be killed on Unstable SMP. But let's back up, because once you look at the pattern behind every single death on this server, you'll realize Teal's name has been on this list for a long time. This is how Teal the bird dies, and exactly why it's coming. Let me start with the most important evidence, because the moment you see this pattern, you can't unsee it. Every single person who has ever stood by Parrot's side as his closest friend has died. Not many of them, not most of them, every single one. Weefy's his first best friend dead in a TNT explosion of his own making. Newfully, who saved Parrot's life on multiple occasions, shot dead by an arrow cannon the moment he tried to leave the team. Dean the Bean executed when Parrot accidentally popped his totem and exposed his identity to the Mafia. Luigi Tone murdered in cold blood during a rigged game of Chance Radoons personally arranged. Boomy rescued from captivity by Parrot and Teal, freed and safe, then killed almost immediately afterward by an invisible Abu strike from Wemmbu that had absolutely nothing to do with him. Naparizzle, whose staged death became the inciting incident for the entire Purge arc. 7 confirmed deaths. Every single one of them was someone who got close to Parrot, trusted him, stood beside him, and paid for it with their life. Keep this pattern in mind because it determines everything that happens next. Here's the critical detail that makes this more than a sad coincidence. These aren't enemies who died fighting against Parrot. They are friends, allies, people who believed their connection to him was a source of strength rather than a death sentence, and not one of them saw it coming. Weefy's died from his own trap backfiring. Newfully was killed the moment he tried to step away. Boomy was killed by a completely unrelated third party who had nothing to do with his storyline. The curse doesn't need a direct connection. It doesn't need a fair fight. It doesn't even need Parrot to be present. It just needs someone close enough to him. Keep that mechanism in mind because it explains more than just who dies. It explains how. There's exactly one person left who fits this pattern and is still alive. Teal the bird. Parrot's best friend since Weefy's died, his bodyguard, the person who's been by his side through the Purge, the King's Arc, the founding of Skymore, and the entire Civil War, the longest surviving member of Parrot's inner circle in the show's history, and he was just banished by Separator. Alone, no kingdom, no protection, no army behind him. Teal has been at Parrot's side continuously since Weefy's died, longer than anyone who's ever held that position. Every previous holder of that position died. Teal has held it longer than anyone else, which means if the pattern is a pattern and not a coincidence, he's overdue. And look at where he actually is right now. Banished, not imprisoned, not killed in battle, cast out alive but stripped of the one thing that's kept him protected this entire time. Proximity to Parrot's kingdom and plot armor. Every time Teal has gotten into serious danger, he's had backup. Parrot's army, the Northern Council's guards, a fashion structure around him. Banishment removes all of that in one move. He's now exactly what every other dead friend of Parrot's was in their final moments. Isolated, exposed, and without the protection that kept them alive up to that point. Now we need to talk about Shoe Billy because this is the single most loaded relationship in Teal's entire arc, and it has never been resolved. Shoe Billy was Teal's trainer, his master, the person who taught him everything about combat before turning into one of Cindercrest's most lethal assets. Shoe Billy is directly responsible for the Skymore massacre, murdering the 1,000-player civilization that Teal and Parrot personally founded. Teal's former master, the man who shaped his entire fighting style, butchered a civilization Teal built with his own hands. Across every documented encounter since, something strange has happened. Shoe Billy has avoided a direct, decisive confrontation with Teal. Their Civil War fight saw Teal lost with all of his armor broken, forced to retreat, but Shoe Billy never finished the job, visibly reluctant to fully engage because of their history. Keep this in mind because it's not mercy, it's just a delay. A former student, banished and isolated, hunting for purpose. The most obvious target for his fury is the man who slaughtered Skymore and broke his armor in their last fight, and now there's nobody around to interrupt them, nobody to pull Teal back, nobody to stop Shoebilly from finishing what he started. The moment Teal goes looking for a rematch, which his entire personality suggests he absolutely will, the conditions are finally in place for Shoebilly to stop holding back. Let's look at Teal's actual combat record, because this is where the evidence becomes genuinely uncomfortable. Teal is a TNT minecart specialist, good enough to train FlameFrags in card combat. He single-handedly defeated the Ouroboros in a heated duel, and he slowed Cindercrest down significantly at the bridge battle. But outside his specialty, the record looks very different. He lost to FlameFrags in a straight PvP tournament. He was swiftly and one-sidedly defeated by God of War at the Black Market confrontation. He lost to Shoebilly during the Civil War with his armor completely destroyed, and even his biggest individual win ended badly. After defeating the Ouroboros, he was immediately captured and held hostage by Sudge Law and God of War. His greatest victory still ended with him in captivity. Banished and isolated, Teal won't have access to the redstone infrastructure that makes his specialty deadly. He'll be fighting on his opponent's terms, not his own. Against Shoebilly, who already beat him once with his full setup available, that's not a fight Teal wins, and his personality makes it worse. Short temper, aggressive outbursts, stubborn refusal to back down even from people he shouldn't provoke. He stuck to his guns during the Civil War when even Parrot was retreating. That fearlessness is what makes him an incredible ally. It's also exactly the trait that gets a character killed the moment the safety net disappears. So here are the 3 ways this actually ends. Theory 1 is the Shoebilly resolution, which I give 50% likelihood. Teal, banished and without protection, tracks down Shoebilly for a rematch with nobody around to stop it. The emotional weight is enormous. A former student forcing a final confrontation with the master who betrayed everything he taught him. But Teal's skill ceiling against true elites and Shoebilly's complete lack of remorse means he won't hesitate a second time. The unresolved master-student dynamic, the Skymore grudge, and Teal's personality all point toward him pursuing this alone. The only counter-argument is that Shoebilly's reluctance could resolve in mercy rather than a kill, but his track record at Skymore makes mercy seem unlikely. Theory 2 is death by proximity to Parrot rather than direct combat, which I give 30% likelihood. Remember when I said that the curse doesn't need a direct connection? Look at how most of these deaths actually happen. Weefy's died from his own trap, Newfully was killed trying to leave. The common thread isn't a fair fight, it's dying because of circumstances tied to Parrot's orbit through indirect and unexpected means. Even banished, Teal's story is still connected to Parrot's. If Parrot tries to reclaim his kingdom, Teal gets pulled back in, and the curse has never needed Teal to be an active participant, it just needs him nearby. Boomy was theoretically safe and removed from the conflict when Wembu's strike found him anyway. Theory 3 is that Teal survives and breaks the curse entirely, which I give 20% likelihood. The reason for this is that Teal is built differently from everyone else on this list. He's not a side character introduced for a single arc. He's a character with protagonist level narrative weight. Every confirmed death on the curse list belonged to a supporting character. If the show is building toward an actual subversion, using 7 deaths to set up an expectation, only to break it because of Teal's unique status, that's a genuinely stronger storytelling beat than simply continuing the pattern. But nothing in his current situation suggests protection is coming anytime soon. 7 people have died for the crime of being close to Parrot. Every single one of them believed their connection to him was a source of strength. Every single one of them was wrong. Teal has survived longer than any of them, which doesn't make him safer, it makes him the only name to check off the list. If Tealball the bird gets killed, it won't be a random accident. It will be the closing of a pattern that started with Refeast and has never once failed to claim whoever stood closest to Parrot. The only question left is whether Shoe Billy is the one holding the mace when it happens, or whether, like Boomy before him, Teal never sees it coming at all. There's an organization on Unstable SMP that hunts down bad players, forces them to march tens of thousands of blocks, then sends them through nether portals to places they never return from. And the craziest part, most players didn't even notice this was happening. Over 1,000 players are gone and now we know exactly who was behind it. This is the truth about Null, and it's way worse than anyone thought. But let's back up because you need to understand how Null operates to see why this is so disturbing. Null showed up at Spoke's base one day as skinless players with scrambled names, and they had abilities that shouldn't exist. When their totem pops in combat, they don't just survive, they instantly teleport away using what's called a Quantum Entangled Totem exploit. They have higher speed stats than normal players, they carry shields with patterns that are impossible to obtain in survival Minecraft. They can see through invisibility. These aren't normal players, these are players with abilities that break Minecraft's rules. So Spoke did what Spoke does. He interrogated people to figure out what was happening. He found Serpig, the former mayor of Capital City, who was working with Null, and Serpig revealed they wanted a token to prove Spoke was dead, which was specifically his chestplate gifted to him. This exploited armor piece called Alt that Spoke got from Jamato P, not just any armor, that specific exploited chestplate. Why would bounty hunters care about a specific piece of exploited armor unless they're not just bounty hunters? Keep this detail about the chestplate in mind because it becomes absolutely critical later. But it gets stranger. Spoke found a book called Mission Null that had over 100 pages of usernames and coordinates. Every single name was a trapper, griefer, or scammer. Bad players. Null wasn't randomly hunting people, they had a list. An organized, comprehensive list of every problematic player on the server. Someone is maintaining that list. Someone is deciding who deserves to be on it. This is where things go from strange to genuinely disturbing. Jumper witnessed Null hunters find an anomalous player and make them walk in a straight line. Just walk for tens of thousands of blocks. And that player's bounty was claimed as dead 3 hours before Jumper saw them walking. So according to the server, this player was already dead, but they were very much alive, just marching like a zombie towards something. Where were they going? To a pole cannon that teleports you 12 million blocks into the Farlands. But Null doesn't just dump you in the Farlands and leave. They force you through a nether portal, and according to Mapik, who actually escaped from Null, whoever has gone through the nether that isn't Null have never returned. Never returned. Over 1,000 players walked through those portals and just disappeared permanently. So let's be clear about what's happening here. Null is identifying bad players, hunting them down with impossible exploits, claiming them as dead while they are still alive, forcing them to march to the Farlands and shoving them through nether portals to a place nobody comes back from. That's not bounty hunting. They have a clear plan for the future. Now we need to talk about Mapik because his story reveals something critical about Null's actual purpose. Before the law fight, Mapik encountered Null hunters in the end dimension, and instead of attacking him, they invited him to join. They gave him a shield with the exact pattern and said he could become a member. He said he couldn't join yet because there was a war happening, he'd think about it later. And during the law fight, Null put a stasis chamber anyway because he was way too trusting. They captured him for being indecisive about their job offer. That's not how bounty hunters operate, that's how recruiters operate. Remember this recruitment attempt because it's part of a much larger plan. Mapik escaped and led Spoke 12 million blocks out to the Farlands where Null's actual operation is based. And this is where the evidence starts piling up that Null is something way bigger than just hunters. They found camps of escaped players hiding in Farlands biomes. They discovered Null can light nether portals in the Farlands, which normal players like Wemmbu can't do. Then they found a trapdoor that Null leaders use. It led to an infinite stone brick staircase going down beneath the Farlands with fibers that lead to different biomes. At the bottom was a village looking area that required redstone torches to see because it was pitch black, and sitting there in the darkness was Jamoto P, Spoke's old ally who taught him exploits and gave him that alt chestplate Null wants so badly. Jamoto P looked at them and said, "I'm here to help." That seemed like hope, but it wasn't. But anyways, what happened next revealed everything. Jamoto P gave Spoke a book threatening to reveal everything and put an end to it all. The book was signed by Jamoto P, which was his mistake. When Maypick read it, the contents changed to an innocent message. But Spoke found another book called Spoke Log Full, and it was Jamoto P tracking Spoke since he joined the server. Every move, every exploit, every action recorded. Jamoto P tried leading them away from the truth, but when Spoke went north instead, Null portals spawned everywhere. Jamoto P accidentally led them into traps. At Dill Pickle's camp called Pickletopia, their gear was stolen. Null hunters had been following them underground the entire time, and Jamoto P never fought, he just watched. Spoke went invisible and tried to kill Jamoto P. Jamoto P pulled his totem at the last second and stasised away. Spoke wore Null armor to frame them, making Jumper and Maypick think Null attacked. The village got invaded by real Null and Jumper was captured. When Maypick's armor broke, revealing Spoke's identity, Spoke tried explaining Jamoto P is the Null leader. Maypick said Spoke was insane and ludicrous. Maypick refused to believe him and left Spoke alone in the caves. Keep this betrayal in mind because it's exactly what Jamoto P wanted. Spoke got trapped in the Skull maze with Null hunters following but not attacking. Another portal spawned and Jamoto P appeared, and then Jamoto P revealed everything. Null exists to bring all the bad players to justice. Everything Jamoto P did wasn't enough. He realized why capture Spoke when someone could do it for him. He let Maypick escape on purpose. Maypick let Spoke right where Jamoto P needed him. Spoke brought Null to all the rebel camps, Dill Pickle's Pickletopia, Cookie's village, every hidden settlement in the Farlands. All the rebel leaders are now captured because of Spoke. Jamoto P said it always ended with Spoke, with death and destruction. Everyone deserves to make their own way, explore the world, make their own choices, but Spoke ruins everything. Somehow it always ends with him, it always ends with death and destruction. Null is the solution to the Spoke problem. Jamoto P told Maypick that Spoke tried to kill Leowook, not Jamoto P. Maypick believed Jamoto P over Spoke. Maypick got new armor and attacked Spoke. He broke Spoke's alt chestplate, the last piece of exploited armor that had survived for 2 years. When it broke, Spoke had nothing left. No special armor, no exploits, no advantages. Maypick was about to leave when Null hunters came through the portal. Null captured Maypick and forced him through the nether portal. Jamoto P made Spoke drop everything, his inventory and ender chest contents. Then he burned it all. Everything Spoke owned, gone. Then Jamoto P forced Spoke through the nether portal, saying this is the end. Not for the server, but it's a new era that will be better without him. Let me be clear about what just happened. Jamoto P wasn't helping Spoke investigate Null. Jamoto P was Null the entire time. The person who taught Spoke how to use exploits, who gave him the alt chestplate, who acted like his mentor and ally, was the leader of the organization hunting him. Every exploit Spoke learned was surveillance. Here's the devastating part that nobody talks about. Spoke accidentally exposed every rebel camp in the Farlands to Null. While Spoke thought he was investigating Null, he was actually helping them capture everyone who opposed them. The rebels who escaped Null's first purge got caught in the second purge, because Spoke brought Null to their doorstep. And Maypick, Spoke's closest ally who escaped Null's first capture, got manipulated into attacking Spoke and then captured by Null anyway. Yamato P turned Spoke's best friend against him, used him to destroy Spoke's lost piece of exploited armor, then sent him to the same nether portal as the other 1,000 missing players. Spoke lost everything. His gear, his armor, his exploits, his friend, his freedom. This marks the first time in a long time where a protagonist has nothing to their name. One player named Planet Lord said the Farlands biomes weren't created naturally, and that whoever discovered the Farlands first on Unstable made them. Yamato P created the Farlands biomes as infrastructure for his operation. Null operates from beneath those biomes in an infinite stone brick staircase with a village at the bottom. They maintain a comprehensive list of every bad player. They can light nether portals where nobody else can. They have exploits that seem beyond normal player capability. They are processing over 1,000 captured players through nether portals. This isn't 3 separate theories. This is one system built by one person for one purpose. And the scariest part, Parrot knows about them and doesn't care. The king of the server literally said all the people that have disappeared are bad and Null is doing more good for my kingdom than bad. Parrot gave Spoke minimal resources to investigate specifically because he doesn't want Null stopped. They are cleaning his kingdom of problematic players while he focuses on spawn and politics. That shows that Null has the king's approval to operate however they want. Yamato P built a system that removes bad players, convinced the king it's helpful, and used it to remove the one player he considered the worst of all. The truth about Null is that they are not bounty hunters, and they're not admins, and they're not just exploiters. They're Yamato P's system, built by the server's exploit master, operating since before most players joined, cleaning up bad players through a process that ends with nether portals and permanent disappearance. Yamato P didn't just build Null to remove bad players, he built it to remove the bad players Spoke. Everything Spoke learned, every exploit he used, every mission he went on, it was all surveillance. Yamato P was testing him, tracking him, waiting for the right moment to remove him permanently. And it worked. Spoke lost everything. The alt chestplate destroyed after 2 years. His gear burned. His best friend Maypick captured and sent through a nether portal. All the rebel camps exposed because Spoke led Yamato P right to them. Over 1,000 players are gone. And Spoke just became 1001. Yamato P's final words were, "This is the end." Not for the server, but it's a new era that would be better without him. When Yamato P said, "I'm here to help" at the bottom of Null's headquarters, it wasn't a rescue mission, it was a trap. He led Spoke through the Farlands. He manipulated him into exposing rebel camps, turned Maypick against him, destroyed everything Spoke owned, and forced him through a nether portal to whatever fate awaits the other 1,000 missing players. Spoke made it to his execution. Null wasn't recruiting Spoke. Null was removing him, and they succeeded. The question isn't what is Null anymore. We know the answer. The question is what happens to Spoke now that he's been processed through the same system as the other 1,000 missing players. Yamato P said it himself. Somehow it always ends with you. It always ends with death and destruction. Maybe that's why Null exists, not to clean up bad players in general, to clean up the one player who ruins everything for everyone else. The player who blew up farms, destroyed the mafia, killed countless players and never faced consequences. Null is justice, and Spoke just got judged. This is Mainpat, a combat master, Flame's best friend, and I believe that he is about to change the civil war forever. But to understand why, you need to understand something that most people who joined the server during the Civil War have never actually seen, because main path has been gone long enough that newer players only know the name, but they don't know that speed is a specialty. Anyways, let's start with the Invisible Mafia arc, when they controlled the entire server with thousands of members, diamond stream elites with maces, and clown peers on their side. Main path was living alone in a treehouse space. The Mafia massacred civilizations, imprisoned thousands of players, and made the whole server do what they said. They never touched main path's treehouse, and that was not because they did not know he existed, it was because sending players there would basically be a death mission. After he left the main server and became an assassin, he built up a combined bounty of 9,000 diamonds from Bat and the Law put together, not for destroying factions or killing leaders, just for existing and doing what he wanted. Both of the server's most powerful forces had him as a top target, and neither one ever collected it. That is who main path is, and with Parrot having lost the Civil War, there's no better time than right now for him to make his grand return. To understand the first connection, you need to know who Wemmbu actually is, because Wemmbu did not become the server's most powerful weapon by accident. Every single thing Wemmbu knows about fighting came from main path directly, because main path built him from the ground up. Speed 2 combat is main path's specialty, and he passed it straight to Wemmbu. Elytra Macing, the fighting style that made Wemmbu one of the most feared players in this entire war. Main path taught him the mechanics and the approach from scratch. The way Wemmbu manages his inventory, the way he thinks about fights, the idea that the winner of a fight is whoever wins and not whoever fought cleanly, all of that came from main path. He even gave Wemmbu his first mace and taught him the specific tricks that a mace fighter needs to know. So when Wemmbu broke Jubilee's helmet at Steampunk City and forced him to retreat, that was main path's training running against the Civil War's most feared fighter. When Wemmbu held his own against FlameFrags in the cave before Jaden stepped in, that was main path's lessons doing the work. And when Wemmbu dropped arbor strikes on both sides at Capital City, made 6 elite players including both faction leaders in the same fight, and walked away, that completely reckless and honor-free way of fighting is main path's way of thinking fully alive in the most destructive solo performance the server has ever seen. Wemmbu is main path's greatest student and possibly his only truly successful one, which makes what main path said when he left so important. The last thing he told Wemmbu was 2 words: lost cause. And that is not just an insult, because those 2 words became the engine of Wembu's entire story since then. The obsession with proving he was the strongest player on the server, the increasingly reckless behavior, the willingness to take on multiple elite players at the same time, all of it connects back to a man who trained him completely, walked away and told him he would never amount to anything. Main path wanted a focused, controlled, careful fighter, but what he got instead was someone who absorbed the honor, does not matter lesson, while completely ignoring the follow the plan part. And the result is a player who fights without any limits but also without any coordination around him. Alone he is extraordinary, but inside any structure he is chaos, which is exactly what the Civil War has been watching play out this whole time. Now look at where Wemmbu actually is right now. He wiped out both sides of the Civil War at Capital City at the same time. He was betrayed by Arachnid and dropped into an unknown location at the bottom of a cave, and he is, for the first time in his entire war, completely without a faction and without anyone telling him what to do. If main path hears what Wemmbu did at Capital City, and he will hear about it because everyone heard about it, his reaction to those 2 words, lost cause, becomes the most important emotional question in this war right now, because Wemmbu did not just prove he was not a lost cause, he proved it the loudest possible way in front of the entire server, against both faction leaders at the same time. Whether main path looks like that and feels like he was wrong, or looks at it and decides that power without control is exactly what he was afraid of, changes everything about where Wemmbu goes from here. The second connection is the one that actually brings main path back, and it is much more direct than the Wemmbu situation because it comes with a promise already attached. Main path told FlameFrags one thing when they made up after everything that happened between them, that they would always be brothers and he would always be there for him. And every single time main path has broken his decision to stay away from the server, it has been because of Flame, not because of politics or money or any war happening around them. just because of Flame. When Flame found him after a year away and needed spear training, main pair agreed, even though he wanted to be left alone. When Flame got captured by the law, main pair came back for him even though he had already said he was leaving for good. When Flame needed help taking down the law compound, main pair stayed and helped even though working with others goes against everything he prefers. The pattern is the same every single time and it is simple. Main pair will not get involved in wars or server politics, but he will show up when Flame genuinely needs him. So look at what Flame's situation actually is right now and ask yourself whether it meets that condition. Lomedy is gone. The person Flame joined Cindercrest for and the only reason he was ever in this war, left to go back to his farms after admitting the whole thing was a mistake from the start. Flame has no faction, no base, and no clear next move, because he quietly turned on Cindercrest by helping Parrot at the Northern Council through what looked like an attack but was actually a private conversation, which means Cindercrest sees him as a traitor now, while Parrot has no formal agreement with him yet. He has a promised rematch with Wemmbu that has not happened. He is completely alone for the first time in his entire arc, with no one to follow and no relationship left to build his decisions around. The last time Parrot was this alone, he went looking for main pair and found a man in a cave who almost attacked him on sight, and main pair came back anyway. The situation right now is worse than it was then because the server is in the middle of its biggest war. Flame has made enemies on multiple sides, and the only relationship he has left that still means something is the promise main pair made when they last saw each other. Main pair is coming back, and the question is what happens when he gets there, because there are a few different ways this plays out depending on what Flame decides and what main pair finds. The most direct path is the simplest one. Main pair finds Flame, because finding people is what he does for work as an assassin and speed is his specialty. Koki. The most direct path is the simplest one. Main pair finds Flame because finding people is what he does for work as an assassin, and speed is his specialty. Then he shows up of the capital city while Flame is operating alone with no orders and no direction, and makes his version of an offer the way he always does. Whatever Flame decides become the decision both of them act on, because that is how it has always worked between them, with main pair following Flame's lead even though he is the more dangerous of the two, because the whole relationship is built on brotherhood rather than who is stronger. If Flame decides to join Parrot's side properly, main pair follows and Parrot gains something he has absolutely no other way of getting, which is the person who built Wembu's entire fighting style from scratch. Main pair knows every habit Wembu developed during training, every gap in this game that never got fixed, every pattern he falls back on when the fight gets tight, because he created those habits himself. Parrot trying to deal with Wemmbu while main pair providing that kind of inside knowledge is a completely different situation from Parrot facing Wemmbu with no idea what is coming. If Flame decides the Wemmbu rematch comes first, having main pair in his corner changes that fight completely. The cave fight between Flame and Wemmbu was close until Jaden joined in and shifted it. Flame with main pair specific knowledge about Wembu's patterns, going up against a Wembu who is currently unsteady and angry of the Arachnid's betrayal is not the same fight that happened in the caves, and whoever wins that rematch settles something that has been sitting unfinished since the bridge confrontation at the start of this war. Because it is the only real question about individual power that this civil war has not answered yet. The third option is the one main pair would actually want, which is that he and Flame just operate together outside any faction and answer to nobody. Not Parrot, not Cindercrest, not Null, just two players moving through the war and making their own decisions about what to go and what to do. This is how main pair has always preferred to work, and Flame might actually want that too, after everything that happened with Cindercrest and the law and every other faction structure he has trusted and had blow up in his face. A Flame who is done answering to factions combined with a main pair who has never answered to anyone is something that neither side of this war has any plan for. because you cannot plan around players who do not have a schedule or a base or a chain of command to target. There's also the question of Arachnid directly, because main pet hunts rich players for work, and Arachnid just became someone with both a professional and personal reason to be on that list. As a target, Arachnid runs the most resource heavy operation outside the main factions. That is exactly the kind of player main pet goes after. On a personal level, Arachnid took Wemmbu, the student main pet called a lost cause, but still spent an entire season training, used him as a tool for the whole civil war, and then tried to kill him the moment he was no longer useful. Main pet walking away from Wemmbu is one thing, someone else using him up and throwing him away is a different thing entirely, and main pet is not the kind of person who sees no difference between the two. The Civil War's fighting style has been built around three things the whole time: maces for big damage hits, elytras for moving fast, and bows for range. Every major battle has been fought inside that framework, and every elite fighter has built their approach around it, which means every elite fighter is trained against opponents who operate inside it. Main pet does not operate inside it because he uses a spear, a weapon he was the first player to master on the server, and one that has tricks nobody else has had time to figure out yet. Main pet trained the most powerful weapon in this war from nothing. He shaped the strongest solo fighter in this war into what he is today. He is the only person on the server who understands Wemmbu. He made a promise to the one person whose situation right now demands that promise be kept, and he has a weapon that the entire Civil War has been fighting without ever having to face: the spear. The Mafia might return on Unstable SMP because with Parrot exiled and Spoke escaping Purgatory, this is the perfect time for Ashlag to make his return. But let's back up and understand exactly why I'm saying this. Buried somewhere in the far end, there's a location that contains every single resource the Mafia accumulated across its entire reign. It contains stasis chambers for every former member, hundreds of thousands of players, still active, still wired, still capable of killing every single person who ever wore the eye trim the moment someone touches what's inside the Mafia tomb, and it's guarded by a single player. Marlow, described as the #1 cheater on the entire server. The Mafia technically never ended. The infrastructure that made it the most powerful faction in server history is still sitting in the far end, fully intact and waiting. Keep this tomb in mind because it's the foundation for everything that happens next. Now here's the critical detail that most people miss about the tomb itself. When Spoke destroyed the stasis chambers, he dismantled the active system housed in the man-made mountain that the Mafia used to control its membership during their reign. Those chambers are gone, but the tomb is completely different. The tomb in the far end is a post-dissolution archive, a separate location created specifically to house all former member polls and all accumulated resources after the Mafia fell. It wasn't the system Spoke dismantled, it was built after the Mafia's official defeat, which means it has never been attacked, never been discovered by any protagonist other than Parrot, and remains fully functional. The failsafe built into it is the detail that matters most. If anything is stolen from the tomb, all former Mafia member stasis chambers active simultaneously, and every person who ever wore the trim dies instantly in the void. So what has Ashlag actually been doing since the Mafia fell? He went quiet, which is not the same as going away. His base at Point Nemo has multiple layers of hidden rooms, a dragon egg, a void room full of unrenewable items, and a stash of resources that proves he never stopped accumulating. He just stopped being visible about it. The Dragon Egg trade to Radunes for 100 mending books is the most significant documented post-Mafia activity, because that single transaction gave him access to Radunes, the richest player on the server, as a business connection providing cover, resources, and a relationship with the one economic power that most factions need to stay operational. When Spoke raided Ashlag's base and found the Void Room, Ash caught him. He's still watching, he's still operating, and he said something to Spoke that wasn't just taunting. It was a prediction. He told Spoke that he'd turn out just like him and make a mafia of his own, which is a prediction that's coming true right now. Here's why now is the exact moment for the mafia to return. The mafia's original rise happened during a period of server instability, where resources were scarce. Factions were fighting each other and a large population of new players had no protection and no organizational structure. The Civil War produced every single one of those conditions simultaneously, and at a scale the original Mafia never benefited from. Parrot's kingdom is broken. Syndicrats won, but both armies got depleted. The law is permanently dismantled. The server's most powerful players, including Wemmbu and FlameFrags, are isolated and factionless. And the Mafia's primary recruitment pool, new players with no resources, no protection, and no knowledge of the server's power dynamics, has exploded in size because Parrot opened spawn before losing the war. Thousands of new players flooded the server, specifically because Parrot created a safe environment, and Separata won the Civil War, meaning that safe environment no longer exists. These are exactly the players the Mafia built its power on the first time, players who didn't know about the server to question what they were joining. Players who needed protection badly enough to accept conditions they otherwise couldn't. That demographic just tripled in size. Now we need to talk about who actually brings the Mafia back, because this is where it gets complicated. There are 3 realistic scenarios and they are all disturbing in different ways. The first and most likely scenario is Ashlag teaming with Clownpius. Clownpius wore the Netherite trim, a special rank chosen personally by Ashlag, the highest collaborated designation the Mafia has ever given to an independent operator. His Nether civilization is already a continuation of Mafia principles: complete control, resource monopoly, and lethal consequences for unauthorized access. He sold materials to both sides in the Civil War simultaneously. He has the strongest independent resource base on the server, and he has a documented grudge against Parrot for raiding his vault. If Ashlag reaches out to Clownpius in the Civil War's aftermath, the Nether's infrastructure becomes the Mafia's supply chain without either of them needing to rebuild from scratch. Clownpius brings resources and Nether control. Ashlag brings the tomb and the stasis leverage over hundreds of thousands of former members. And together they recreate the Mafia's 2 greatest weapons in one conversation. The second scenario, which is pretty possible, involves FlameFrags. Flame was a diamond trim Mafia member who had a mace and the rank that came with it, then gave up the mace because he considered them dishonorable. He's now factionless, without Lamedy, floating in a post-Civil War server without clear purpose. The Mafia's diamond trim system required killing another Dalmir member to rank up, which means Flame earned that position through real combat. His pole is presumably still in the tomb stasis system, which is not a small detail. That's leverage Ashlag holds over one of the 5 best individual fighters on the server. If Ashlag threatens to activate the failsafe, Flame is one of hundreds of thousands who would die instantly. If Ashlag instead offers him protection, resources, and purpose after the war left him with nothing, the conversation becomes complicated. The evidence against it is Flame's demonstrated moral development and his friendship with Wemmbu, but a factionless fighter with no clear future and a stasis pole in a chamber somewhere in the far end is not in a strong negotiating position. The third scenario is the one nobody is talking about, which includes MinutTag. When he defected from the Mafia and revealed its secrets to Spoke, mentioned one specific detail that was never followed up. The Mafia used to have a different leader who was less cruel than Ashlag. This person's identity is completely unknown, but if they are still on the server, still connected to the Mafia's former structure, still aware of the tomb's location and content, they represent a factor for the Mafia's return that doesn't require Ashlag's participation at all. a former leader with an understanding of how the Mafia operated before Ashlag made it into what it became, and presumably with a completely different philosophy about what the organization should be. Here's a detail that almost nobody has connected to the Mafia's return. The Wemmbu's enchantment book that Wemmbu merged into his mace gambit probably came from a Diamond Trim Mafia member, not a former member who retired, not someone who left the server, a Diamond Trim Mafia member who was apparently still operating recently enough for their loot to end up in the underground civilization's reward structure. Diamond Trims were the rarest rank in the Mafia, earned by killing another Diamond Trim in a deathmatch. If a Diamond Trim is actively operating on the server right now, carrying Mafia gear and dropping Wemmbu's books into faction reward systems, then the Mafia's return is even more performative than the tomb alone suggests. This could be a foreshadowing technique used by the writers of Unstable SMP. So here's exactly how the return happens. Ashlag doesn't announce a comeback. He starts quietly activating things he already built. Point Nemo becomes operational. Former Diamond Trim members receive contact through methods that don't appear in any log. The tomb's resources begin moving, not taken from it because that triggers the failsafe, but made accessible to specific members who physically visit it. Former Mafia members who built new lives and new factions receive a message they didn't expect. A reminder that their pole is still in the chamber in the far end. Not a threat, just a reminder and an invitation. The ones who were new players when they joined, given a copper trim and a mission without fully understanding what they were agreeing to, those players are the most susceptible, and they are still the majority of the membership. Then Ashlag rebuilds the trim system quietly, acquires resources through Redunes and Clownpiers, and waits. He doesn't try to control the whole server at once this time. He learned from Season 1's defeat. He knows what Spoke's approach looked like. He starts smaller, stays invisible, and waits for another major confrontation between whatever remains of Parrot's faction and Cinecrest's new regime. When both sides are at their lowest point, Ashlag finally steps out of Point Nemo, fully visible, armorless, exactly as he was, and says the words that were always coming. Did you really think it ended? The Mafia never ended. It waited. Ashlag has a fully stocked tomb with the server's largest single resource cache, stasis leverage over hundreds of thousands of former members, a wealthy ally in Redunes, a proven teammate in Clownpiers, a server full of desperate new players who are the exact demographic the Mafia recruited from the first time, and a civil war that just finished doing the work for him. From a master of ragebait to a literal hacker, Unstable SMP has had its fair share of villains. This is every single Unstable SMP villain explained. Starting with True Original, he was hired by Weefies during the Director arc to hunt down Parrot and the Bounty Assassin team, and the first thing he did was level an entire town because he was bored. He could teleport, walk on water, copy other players' looks to trick his targets, slow down time, and kill instantly with an aura that stripped a player's whole inventory on contact. He could even clone himself to mine multiple blocks at once. His only real weakness was something as simple as cobwebs. As the hunt dragged on, True Original got so confident that he decided he was above the director who hired him, and tried to kill Parrot for real instead of just scaring him. Bat eventually trapped him at their headquarters, where Newfully fired a max power Obel Strike cannon blast that destroyed him along with the mace he was carrying. Keep that mace in mind, because maces show up again and again throughout this list, as one of the rarest, most dangerous weapons on the server. Next is Mr. Cube 6, a redstone genius who also worked for the director, built around traps instead of raw combat. He built layered setups so dangerous that catching just one member, the Rupture, on a single pressure plate was enough to threaten blowing up all of Bat's headquarters at once. He always seemed to be thinking several steps ahead. Even after Bat captured and interrogated him, handing him a dandelion as some kind of marker, The director somehow already knew Cube had received it before anyone could have told him. Cube escaped using a stasis chamber, the same trick a lot of villains on this list used to dodge real consequences. It's Real Me was another assassin sent by the director, and he's proved some villains barely needed a plan to be terrifying, just cold focus and a weapon nobody else had yet. He carried a mace at a time when almost nobody had one, using it to kill about half the bad members who tried to ambush him. After cornering and nearly killing Parrot, he simply told him the director sent him and walked away, treating the whole thing like a job that was now finished. He later resurfaces as something closer to a mental figure for FlameFrags, making him one of the few villains on this list whose story doesn't end in a clean defeat. That brings us to Weefies, who turned out to be the director the entire time, and arguably the most personal villain Parrot had ever faced, simply because it was someone he already trusted completely. He faked his own death using a dark sword trick, then resurfaced as the invisible director. His stated motive was protecting Parrot for his own good, even while running these elaborate lethal games against him. He killed Newfully directly with an arrow cannon, trapped Jumper Who and the Rupture over the void as leverage, and eventually locked Parrot inside Paragon, an escape-proof prison, forcing him to give up everything he owned, including his spyglass. Their story ended on 2 linked pressure plates wired to detonate hundreds of TNT if either stepped off, and Parrot survived by dropping his spyglass onto the plate in his place. Weefies was caught in the explosion, and this time he actually died for real. Prince Zem ruled the Zem Empire behind a massive wall built around Spawn, and he started out as a genuine ally to Wemmbu, even helping him hunt down Spoke early on, but Zem's growing paranoia eventually took over, leading him to betray Wemmbu outright, setting him up to be killed by FlameFrags and openly admitting he saw Wemmbu as too weak to bother killing himself. He's later imprisoned by the law, broken out by Spoke, and ends up helping start District 13 version 2 against Letters K. Venom led a toxic civilization that repeatedly harassed FlameFrags during his solo player era, griefing his camp and kidnapping his dog Ashen. After wave after wave of attacks using strength potions and poison arrows failed to slow him down, Flame hunted Venom back to his own base and killed him in a direct fight while wearing only half his armor. Ashlag is easily the defining villain of Season 1, and arguably the most dangerous villain in the entire series. He ran the Invisible Mafia, the biggest faction the server has ever seen, which is exactly how he became so powerful. Spoke eventually infiltrated the Mafia under the codename Fish Bucket, destroyed the Stasis Chamber system, and that was the end of the Mafia. Boosfer comes up constantly across Season 2 without ever needing his own dedicated arc. He paid Wemmbu to destroy a valley that turned out to be a hidden animal sanctuary, sent TNT bomber planes after his enemies, and ran in a server election against Parrot before losing it. He's just a master of rage bait. Jaden Man led the pirates from the Great Sea, and he's one of the only players to ever dual wield a trident and a mace. His rivalry with Wemmbu spans multiple arcs, repeatedly invading his civilizations and stealing Lomadi's mace, which became a long-running grudge for FlameFrags. He was later captured by the law, with Letters K using him as leverage to control Wemmbu. After being freed during the King's Arc finale, he slowly shifts from antagonist to uneasy ally, eventually fighting alongside the protagonist against the Law's army. Leerwook founded the Bounty Assassin team to hunt down players he saw as corrupt, but his judgment was never as clean as he believed it was. His rivalry with Spoke became deeply personal, and he vowed the conflict between them would never end until Spoke was dead. That promise ended up being ironic, since he pulled his own stasis chamber pole without realizing Spoke had already rigged it, falling into the void for good. Straight, also known as Mind Manor, worked on the Jaren in the Skyblock civilization, acting as an enforcer who policed Wemmbu when he infiltrated the civilization, even forcing him into a sumo duel to decide his fate. It later came out that Straight had been secretly working with the Invisible Mafia the whole time, leaking the civilization's location and enabling the Mafia's takeover. Jaren ruled that same Skyblock civilization under a strict join or die rule, secretly stockpiling items that shouldn't even be obtainable under Skyblock rules, just to control his citizens. Wemmbu eventually exposed him from it, right before the Invisible Mafia, aided by Straight's betrayal, conquered the civilization anyway. Clownpius claims the entire Nether as his personal kingdom, holding a total monopoly over netherite and brewing resources. Lattice K might be the single biggest villain in the entire series, just based on how long he stuck around and how much damage he caused. He founded the Law as a justice organization and turned it into outright tyranny, sacrificing 1,000 of his own soldiers in a doomed fight against Wemmbu and FlameFrags purely to capture Wemmbu and use it as political capital. He was eventually defeated by Parrot and imprisoned under mining fatigue, the same punishment Wemmbu once suffered under his rule. He was later freed through a hostage exchange during the Civil War, becoming Separata's self-described final piece of the puzzle. Shubili was hired by Cindercrest to assassinate both Teal and Parrot, and even though that first attempt failed, he became one of the most feared fighters of the entire war, responsible for the Skymo massacre, wiping out almost an entire 1,000-player civilization. What makes him interesting is that he's actually Teal's former teacher in Elytra Mason combat, and he visibly avoids fighting Teal directly, despite showing no remorse for anything else he's done. This leads me to Separata, who leads Cindercrest and stands as the main villain of the Civil War from Parrot's side. His motivation is personal. He blames Parrot for opening spawn to new players, claiming the resulting bandit attacks killed his own friend. Arachnid rules the Kingdom of the Caves, a massive underground civilization, and he's far sneakier than he first appears. He starts as a candidate in the server's election and a major threat during the Purge event, hunting rival candidates using TNT rigged traps. He later captures eggchan to coerce Wemmbu into joining his civilization, dangling eggchan's freedom as a reward for dangerous missions, including the assassination of High Water City's leader. While publicly allied with Separata, Arachnid secretly resents the arrangement and rigs his own kingdom with TNT, so Cindercrest could never inherit it intact. He ultimately orders Wemmbu to betray and massacre both Cindercrest's and Parrot's forces during the Battle of Capital City, purely to clear his own path to the throne. Youngie Axe serves as Arachnid's enforcer and second in command. He's responsible for much of Wembu's daily mistreatment, including forcing him and Jadenman into a deathmatch after they accidentally summon a warden, an act so extreme that even Arachnid steps in to scold him. He later uses eggchan as a bargaining chip too, giving Wemmbu a brutal choice between joining the kingdom or watching eggchan die. He grows resentful when Wemmbu is promoted above him, protesting loudly enough that Arachnid threatens to ban him. The invisible guy is pure filler. He stole eggchan's book of server secrets after the Sculpt Kingdom forced eggchan to hand it over. He hunted eggchan down using that information, eventually kidnapping him and auctioning him off in a bidding war between Wemmbu, FlameFrags, Arachnid, and Jadenman. Then he just disappeared until FlameFrags fought him again and destroyed him. Finally, there's Yamato P, who might be the most tragic villain on this list. He started as Spoke's first real ally, teaching him exploits and glitch mechanics that define his early career. Their partnership fractured when Spoke wanted to destroy every end portal to duplicate mobs faster, and Yamato accused him of trying to play God before vanishing from the server. When he resurfaced, he had founded Null Hunters, an operation built to hunt down so-called bad players, with Spoke framed as the server's single biggest threat. He runs a hidden prison called Purgatory, which Spoke swiftly escaped from. So what connects every single villain on this list? Almost none of them actually started out evil. Prince Zam wanted control, Letus K wanted order, Jamato wanted answers, and even Separata just wanted to protect the people he loved. Remember the maze that True Original carried at the very start? Well, by the end of this list, maze, stasis chambers, and rigged loyalty have shown up over and over as the exact same tools every villain reaches for, no matter what side of the story they are standing on. The Zam Empire arc is one of the most overlooked arcs on Unstable SMP, so for those of you who are new to Unstable, this video will cover everything that happened in the Prince Zam Empire. And even if you've been watching Unstable since day 1, I promise you'll learn something new from this video. The whole arc starts with Spoke and a secret he was hiding from everyone on the server. Spoke had discovered a huge number of exploits and glitches, things that should not be possible in normal survival Minecraft. And he needed somewhere to hide the work he was doing, so he paid the real Squirtle and her master builders to construct 5 massive structures called the Wonders, using items he had duplicated through his exploits as payment, and he built his real operation underneath them where nobody could see. Wemmbu started getting suspicious almost immediately, and that suspicions eventually came to a head in a fight underneath one of the Wonders, which pushed Spoke to make a drastic decision and destroy his own Wonders before anyone could find out what was really going on inside them. Parrot and Rochambeau Games tried to protect the structures while Spoke tore them down, one by one. And it was during this chaos that Ro was revealed to be secretly working alongside Wemmbu the entire time. The final wonder came down and Spoke's cover was gone. What happened next shows just how clever Spoke actually was, even under pressure. He had built a giant vault that Wemmbu eventually discovered and broke into, fighting through multiple layers of security to get there, only to find Spoke waiting inside, revealing the vault was never a vault at all. It was a trap disguised as a prison, and Wemmbu barely escaped. Spoke then teamed up with Maypick to hunt down the rest of the duplicated items, destroying several vaults built by Rochambeau Games and accidentally burning down both Squirtle's house and JPEX's house in the process. Eventually, Ro cornered himself and Spoke in the end, and when Spoke followed him there, Ro admitted that there were no more exploited items left. Spoke escaped, figured out that the last vault had been the very first one he visited, went back and destroyed everything inside it, and finally closed that chapter. But Spoke wasn't done messing with people. He decided to send Parrot on a fake quest for the server's greatest secret, a trail of trolls that dragged Parrot and his friends Weefies through an explosive cave, the Void, a giant ice parkour challenge, an obsidian maze, an underwater scavenger hunt, and a full escape room. When they finally met Spoke at the end of it all, he told one of them they'd have to chunk ban themselves for the other to learn the secret, and Weefies volunteered without hesitation. Spoke then revealed the secret was completely made up, and he only wanted revenge on Parrot for something that happened between them earlier. Keep that chunk ban in mind, because Weefies being stuck in that prison ends up being the reason the entire next phase of this arc even happens. Meanwhile, Wemmbu and Prince Zam had both been trying to track Spoke down during all of this, partly because Spoke's people blew up part of the Zam Empire during the chaos of the scavenger hunt. The two of them used arrows left behind from battles to track down and chunk ban Spoke's henchmen one by one, picking off Squirtle, Jumper Hood, the Rupture, and Fans in the process. Spoke tried to ambush Zam at one point and nearly pulled it off, but Wemmbu and Zam eventually cornered Spoke himself and got him chunk banned too. Now Parrot had a problem. Weefies was stuck in Zam's prison system, and Parrot was not going to leave him there. He brought in Rackrup 2 to help, and together they started breaking into Zam's prisons one by one, freeing the Rupture first, then Fans, though Fans immediately chunk banned himself again out of pure fear of dying. As each prison fell, Zam kept moving his guards to protect the most important one, holding Weefies and Spoke. This accidentally made freeing Jumper Who extremely easy, since her prison was suddenly left unguarded. Parrot brought in Canadian to help with the final breakout. Chunk banned all 6 gods and they successfully freed Weefies, though Spoke escaped in the process. That escape made Zam furious enough to hire Clownpius to hunt Parrot down. Back to Clownpius, who was now hunting Parrot without Parrot even knowing why at first. During one of Clown's attacks, Leerwook, Jumper, the Robchu, and Woogie Axe showed up and saved them, and the group tried to set the trap for Clown at a vault. Clown came in with Mogum and Foray MC, and the trap failed completely. In retaliation, Clown blew up Leerwook's base. Parrot and Weefies tried to chunk ban at Clown's base next, and that failed too. Eventually, they resorted to kidnapping Brenzy Croft, Clown's close friend, as leverage, but Foray immediately kidnapped Weefies in response, forcing Parrot to let Brenzy go. Clown forced Weefies to give up Parrot's coordinates, and things got very bad very quickly after that. What saved Parrot's mindset was actually Weefies talking him down from killing Brenzy, a moment that shows how much Weefies kept Parrot grounded even while they were both being hunted. They eventually blew up Clown's castle, arranged a one-on-one fight for the next day. Parrot activated a trap and Clown simply vanished. When they went to tell the others, everyone was gone, just a sign left behind from Clown. Parrot came back to his old base and found a book waiting for him there. Remember that spyglass Parrot was carrying throughout the whole scavenger hunt Spoke put him through? The one Spoke seemed obsessed with getting. Well, it's about to matter a lot more. While all of that was happening, Wemmbu and eggchan had started working as paid base destroyers just to survive, since they had almost no resources. Rochambeau Games paid them to destroy Spoke's end base, which they pulled off cleanly. Woogie paid them to destroy Foray's base, which was much harder, but they got through it and came out with serious loot. Main Pass secretly tipped them off to the treasure hunters, and Boosfer from that group hired Wemmbu to destroy an entire biome. Parrot and Weefies showed up mid-job to warn Wemmbu that the treasure hunters were actually the villains. And once Wemmbu got his payment, he built an Arbor Strike cannon and demolished their entire base. Then he and eggchan went and blew up Prince Zam's statue at spawn, making the war official. The final push against Zam was not simple. Wemmbu attacked the Empire multiple times, nearly killing Zam but getting forced back by his gods over and over. Mainpad decided to fully betray Zam and join Wembu's side, tipping them off that Zam was planning to attack Rochambeau Games' civilization. Wemmbu rushed there and stalled long enough for Ro's people to escape. Then the group went after Zam's top people directly, successfully trapping Youngie X, Penta, and Sohin through a mix of traps and blackmail. Zam fought back hard though, freed all 3 of them and captured eggchan in the chaos. That capture of eggchan is the moment that changes everything, because Wemmbu nearly gave up entirely after it happened. And it's worth understanding just how much eggchan means to him. Wemmbu had been fighting this whole war for their civilization, but watching his best friend get taken pushed him to come up with one last plan. He figured out how to smuggle items using his Arbor cannon to create a distraction, geared eggchan up through his ender chest during the lag spike, and they broke out together. Wemmbu then unleashed the full Arbor Strike cannon on the Zam Empire, and after everything collapsed around him, Zam and Wemmbu finally do one-on-one. It ended with Zam apologizing for everything he'd done, which is a genuinely surprising moment for a character built entirely on paranoia and control. Then Clownpius appeared out of nowhere and kidnapped them both. What followed is one of the strangest sequences in this entire arc. Clown dropped Wemmbu, Zam, eggchan, and Pangy all into Proton, his inescapable prison, purely for his own entertainment. They split into groups, gathered gear, occasionally fought each other, and had to unite when Clown sent Foray MC in as a trap. Pangy tried to escape through the nether and got chunk banned. which forced Zam to finally agree to cooperate with Wemmbu. They designed an enderpearl cannon to escape with Canadian's help, beat back Foray using TNT minecarts, and when Clown flooded the prison with new players, Zam recruited most of them. Wemmbu eventually convinced Zam that Clown wouldn't let either of them die, so fighting each other was pointless and Zam backed off. Guards came in as Wemmbu finished the cannon. 8 got left behind since he had no pole, but Wemmbu made it out. Meanwhile, Parrot and Reefies had their own version of Proton to deal with, being switched between cells and using maps to communicate secretly. Parrot organized an escape plan from the inside, gathering materials from wandering traders, building a stasis chamber to let Wemmbu smuggle gear in, and convincing Canadian not to sabotage the plan even though Canadian wanted to stay. Jumper got put in solitary confinement. They broke her out, destroyed every chunk band they could find, and when the last one turned out to be unbreakable, they realized he had one elytra too few. Canadian gave his to Parrot without being asked, letting everyone else escape while leaving himself behind, then contacted them through the map system, and they found his secret stasis at his base and pulled it, freeing him too. The arc officially closed with Wemmbu and Zam getting dropped into an escape room designed by Watto. Zam left Wemmbu behind partway through, forcing Watto to step in and guide Wemmbu himself. They eventually reunited, found a mace inside the room, and used it to solve the final challenges, got their gear back piece by piece, and escaped into the end where Clown was waiting. Clown demanded the mace, Zam slipped away. Clown respawned the dragon and fought Wemmbu head on until Wemmbu had no choice but to drop it. Clown took the mace and left, and Wemmbu finally got out. And that marks the end of the Zam Empire.